The year 2000, something significant happens. I think Bill Clinton's the president at the time. They welcome China into the WTO, which is the World Trade Organization. They say, China, you are now getting the same trade rules as everyone else in the WTO. You can trade freely. There's no tariffs on you. You're all part of the thing.
We talking Deng era? Is that's
I don't know the Chinese leader at the time, but so it's 2000. At the time this happened, these are the nations that traded more with America in blue and ones traded more with China in red. Okay? This is the state of the world at the time of the WTO entering China. Flash forward just 24 years, the world is drastically different. Now almost everybody trades more with China than they do with us. China now makes a third of all manufactured goods, more than US, Japan, Germany, and South Korea combined. They have just leapfrogged the globe in terms of manufacturing. Half of the new world's industrial robots were made in China. Global shipbuilding, 55% in China. It's actually not an important thing. They control the lithium-ion battery industry. They control the drone industry. They're leading in electric vehicles. There's a lot of areas that China has now become a strategic power in over the course of the last 24 years of trade. And, whether it's fair, there's many arguments that both sides will make about who's being unfair and what's going on and whether China stole IP or what. There's a lot to talk about. And I think there's merits on all sides here. But what I think America is seeing, I think through a really kind of unfortunately foggy, dense Donald Trump lens, but it's like that something is going on here. Something we're falling behind. Something in some way we need to stop this. And that is where the impulse to get these tariffs on China specifically comes from. And again, it's not just America. So I want to point this out because I think it's really important, is that China has really focused on exports to grow their economy. That's their main thing. Because they had a real estate bust. Their internal stuff's kind of actually struggling, but exports are great. They're crushing exports. They're selling EVs all over the world. And every other country in the WTO, not just America, has been reporting more and more challenges. They've been flagging, they've been issues. This is a spike you can see in 24, but also just rising over the time of other countries doing WTO complaints or investigations against China. Specifically on the right, you can see they're coming from India, EU, Brazil, Australia, Turkey. Everyone has been kind of mad that all the manufacturing is leaving their countries and going to China, which has been just the global mecca superpower of manufacturing. So that's where we find ourselves. And that's why it's such an interesting time. Even the tariffs of Trump's first term did not stop this rise. In fact, it's grown in the past few years. Biden kept the things. So that's where we find ourselves. And that's why a coordinated global, having a lot of allies working with you to maybe do a slowly but increasing tariff on China to keep some of the manufacturing out of there makes some sense.
You mentioned last week that a big part of becoming a more developed economy is you sort of naturally lose these manufacturing jobs over time to developing nations behind you that kind of pick up those jobs and are able to supply them with like lower cost of labor, right?
Yeah.
But you mentioned that the developed country like the US, maybe the Norways or the Denmarks or France, you move on to producing more complicated goods that those countries aren't able to produce, and you're specializing in offering like new services that allow your country to keep making things, basically.
Yeah, like move up the value chain.
You move up the value chain.
Okay.
That was the way you described it. What is the end game of moving up the value chain, though? You're forever progressing in a game where countries are chasing your country and trying to catch up. Is it not worth fighting to maintain the original base manufacturing jobs in some way? Because even if I move up the value chain, maybe 20, 30 years from now, those jobs are being chased by Vietnam because they developed even further along the way. Do you know what I'm saying?
I sort of know what you're saying. That's not a problem I can solve in this chair, I'll tell you that.
I feel like we've been solving so many global issues along the way in Lemonade.
After we talked about tariffs last week, they went away. They're gone now. So
it's true.
Yeah, he dropped them.
That is a good point.
They went away before we recorded our next episode.
Right.
That's a good point. I think
Palm of our
Trump
hands.
watched it. I think he's hooked. I don't know. I think you had a good point. Actually, last week you were talking about this, where it's like, if you lose the base manufacturing, eventually you kind of lose the skill set that allowed you to get to the, if like you can't make batteries, you can't make the
I'm not convinced that we will just be higher on the value chain than the rest of the world forever. I don't think there's many indicators that we as Americans or people in the West are inherently, I mean, it's like, if you just think about like most of the centuries where the West has dominated the global world, right? And technology. China, India, the global Southeast, like they've been in immense poverty. And then over the past few decades, you've had what, 2 billion people lifted out of poverty.
Yeah.
The idea that we are some sort of like God race is just insanity. And like, I don't see, if you just look at what's coming out of China and Taiwan and Singapore and India and the sheer number of people, it's like, I don't see how America maintains its position as like, we are the ones high on the value chain. We should be managing everything. So I'm somewhat pessimistic about this. Like the tech industries are exploding in other parts of the world.
Totally.
Well,
Yeah.
I think a good demonstration of this actually is Chinese manufacturing, because I think up until recently, and now that these discussions are more popular and more in the news, I think people used to have this idea of sweatshop in China, like getting together this like shittily made good, and that's what Chinese manufacturing is. And people have that idea from a really long time ago.
Yeah,
but what people don't realize is that the manufacturing industry and this push for exports is they specialized and developed supply chains to create really complex high-end goods. Even doing something within the world of clothing that I gave the example of is it's not just about doing like things more cheaply. It's about offering more refined services that they do not really exist in other countries a lot of the time.
They're
This
the ones
level of
moving up the value chain.
Yeah, the level of specialization is there.
we don't have, in America, we don't have people who can make these factories. And China has just this obscene amount of like STEM graduates who are focusing specifically on manufacturing. It's like, dude, they're lapping us. Like they're going so far beyond any other country. And like, it feels a little daunting. I don't see how it stops. And I don't think Trump's shit is helping at all, but I don't know, man.
It's funny because maybe, do you have something, one more thing?
Well, I want to say, I don't have the graph in front of me, but what I saw recently is that China is kind of going through the very beginnings, the baby steps of a similar thing where the bottom part of the value chain is going somewhere else.
Yes.
Like it's going to Vietnam, it's going to Indonesia, it's going to India, where it's like, it's now too expensive for that very basic level to do in China. So they're going somewhere else. So it might be a cycle. You know, I think at the end of the day, you want to be the one making the electric vehicle or the Boeing jet or the tech company rather than the company making the toasters and the t-shirts. I think I believe in that, but I can see the value of having some competency.